Dear Mrs. Sidonia Jędrzejewska, Member of the European Parliament, dear Mr. Voskinga of the Daily Trouw, dear Professor Leszek Jesień, dear guests, dear friends. My name is Edward Slootweg. I'm the head of the Information Office of the European Parliament in the Netherlands. You are now the guest of the House of Europe, a space of public debate about Europe. I'm honored that the Montesquieu Institute chose this venue to hold this debate. Poland and the Netherlands share much same history, more than we realize, I think. So in a small village of Driel, we have the Sosabowski Square, named after Major General Sosabowski, who with his first Polish independent parachute brigade fought fiercely at the Battle of Arnhem to liberate our country. Far too late, this regiment got the military Williams Order, the highest knighthood order of the Netherlands. But the debate of now and here is not so much about old politics and old times, but it's more about today's politics. It is about the future of the European Union and how countries like Poland sees our future. More integration, less integration, more sharing of sovereignty, less sharing of sovereignty. Questions, questions, questions. So I stop now and I will give the floor to Hans Voskinga, Daily Trouw.
Thank you very much, Edward. On behalf of the Montesquieu Institute and the daily newspaper Trouw, I welcome everybody to this debating event. Especially I welcome to our distinguished Polish guests, Sidonia Jędrzejewska and Leszek Jesień. I pronounce it really well. Edward had some trouble with my name, but it's not Dutch confession. So this is also one of the obstacles for European citizenship, I think, the obstacle of the language. It's not a very common thing for us here to have a public debate with two Polish intellectuals. Mr. Jesień is a political scientist at a university in Warsaw, and Sidonia is member of the European Parliament and member of the delegation of the European People Party, to which also our Christian Democrats belong. It's not very common. It's not a very common thing for us to have a debate on democracy with the democracy in Europe and in Poland as well. So we are very anxious to learn from you your views on both aspects. And I will give the floor first to Mr. Jesień.
Thank you very much indeed for this kind invitation, and in particular to thank the Montesquieu Institute for inviting me and for providing this opportunity to speak about the subject that is, in a sense, the essence of what is going these days in Europe and in all our countries, I believe, which is the state of European democracy. And I would like to also thank my distinguished colleagues from the Polish Embassy for providing me this opportunity to come to Den Haag and try to tackle this topic. I have been asked by the organizers and the newspaper to write a short piece of article which has been published on the subject, so I would not probably invent more than I have written so far on this subject, but let me then dig a little bit into a few of the elements that were tackled in this piece of reflection on the state of European democracy. My first reflection would be probably that we are in a particular, if not a specific state for the European democracy in Europe these days. And the reason why is that because we not only go through the very testing period of the economic, financial, and all sorts of institutional crises in Europe that affects probably the most Euro countries, but also because an element of this crisis affects relationship between the member states of the European Union and their relations with the European Union, as far as I can understand it. If we go back in our normal, regular reading of what democracy is, we all probably know that it pertains to our relations between ourselves, how we organize our political lives. We used to organize our political lives back in the Greek times in the cities, then later on developed that, and until now we are more or less within what is called nation state, which then probably was thought to be transforming itself into something new these days, something new that's sometimes called as post-nation state. But then we created something that is called the European Union. It's something that we also cherished as a very successful endeavor and successful initiative. We cherished that back on the eastern side of the continent. So we did a lot with your help to join the European Union. So we joined. Now we think that we all try to live the European democracy. And then in fact the European democracy, to me, is being developed on two levels. The first level is the relations between the states, but the second level is even more difficult, but it's something that we live through these days. It's the relationship between ourselves, the citizens of all our countries. And in this particular day, and this particular opportunity is very much important to me, because it gives us all, in particular, gives an opportunity to me to discuss the democracy in the sense that as it should be discussed. So between the citizens of, in this case, two countries, and perhaps there are some other citizens in this hall. But if we want to discuss the European democracy, then we need to always discuss that on two layers, between the states and between us. And I'm particularly happy to have, as a counterpart or as a partner in the discussion, a colleague from the European Parliament, because this is the only forum, organized forum, except for the exceptional cases like provided by the Montesquieu Institute today, a permanent forum where the public democracy on the European level can be practiced. So, in a sense, this is what I have said. It's quite obvious to what is being thought about the European levels of European level of policy making, but it has not been always like that. In the past, the European treaties and the practice of the European communities back was a practice, very much an elitist practice, a practice between the diplomats and signature of the treaties, and then the implementation by the European Commission with the help of the European Commission and with the help of the governments. Nobody really asks the people about the content of the Rome Treaty, for example, and its implementation back there in the 1950s, or, to be honest, any other further treaty that followed the Paris and Rome treaties from the 50s. It all changed, in my view, from the Maastricht Treaty onwards. And this is the treaty which provides not only for the euro, as we all know, but also for the European citizenship. And the notion of citizenship combined with four, in fact, all other economic freedoms, free movement of goods, capital, and people and services, provides for an emergence for a fabric on which the European life can be felt by all of us. And if you experience polls in this country, this is because some of the people in our country thought that it might be useful to test the opportunities of their lives in the Netherlands. And there are the Dutch investors in Poland, and the movements are actually getting increased in intensity across the European Union, across Europe. And that is what makes the essential fabric for what I call the politicization of these days. The politicization, which means that there is polls on the streets of the Netherlands, and Dutch people on the streets of Polish cities. There is what is called now the Erasmus generation, so a generation of students that, I mean, for a student these days, not to spend half of a year doing its studies abroad, it's a lost opportunity, which is something absolutely essential, because it is an experience that was not as common, as ubiquitous as it is now in the past. So we have now an intention to look into the goods and wrongs of the Greek administration, for example, and when we also look at the politics of Spain and France with certain interests, obvious interests. So people are looking back into the politics of the Netherlands. Why they do so? Because in my view there is a growing fabric of what I call the politicization of the European life. It's not making us Europeans, unfortunately perhaps, it's not making us Europeans in the sense of a demos. It doesn't transform us into the citizens that would make a new state, the European state. We probably will live happily for some time in Europe, in our circles of nation states, but combined into the European Union. But at the same time, and that is what makes our lives these days particularly interesting, is that our representatives, the governments, the politicians, also the European Parliament, they all make the decisions on the European level. They are pertinent, which are pertinent and very, very important for our daily lives. If we take the European mechanisms to safeguard the Eurozone, for example, it's all about what to do with the public money and how this public money should be scrutinized. What sort of public control and public participation to this decision-making should be. I don't have, of course, answers to these questions, but nevertheless, the fact that those questions are very vibrant and they are resulting in debates across Europe means that we live this period of time in an intensity of our citizenship. This is not a citizenship compared to the citizenship of Poland or the Netherlands, but it's a specific way of organizing our life in Europe. So we have no support without reforms mechanisms these days, for example. We have our citizens feeling naturally a need to reflect back and a need to go back to their nation states for security of relationship that goes close to their heart, because they probably don't understand what is going on the European level. This is an interesting, very interesting moment in my reasoning about the European democracy these days, in fact, which is the distinction between what is national, what is European and international. In the traditional sense of the words, the life was of any citizenship, of any citizen, was in fact concentrating on what is around our houses, what is around our and done within our states. All the rest was the international affairs. All the rest was done with the help of our diplomats, governments, representatives, who represented us and made the deals on our behalf. We tried to cross this threshold in the European Union because the distinction between what is domestic and what is international has been blurred in the European Union. It's not that clear any longer whether the policy of transportation, for example, is made by The Hague or Brussels, by Warsaw or Brussels combined with Strasbourg. The same goes for environment or energy and other policy. But still, when we, as citizens, when we want something to do in our lives, we ask, in particular, our national politicians. When we intensify this life in the European Union, as we do these days, when we intensify this life into the mechanisms that make our Eurozone, for example, more secure, safe, then we do the consequences, that we do the deals on behalf of our citizens at European level, which is not any longer the international level, but still this distinction between domestic, European and international has not been grasped by our citizens very clearly, and I think this distinction will remain with us for some time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Leszek. You ended your story with a real cliffhanger. Will people cross the Rubicon? And that's the main question, I think. Will the European adventure have sufficient support among the peoples of this continent? So, to reflect on this, I invite Sidonia on the floor.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm very glad to be here with you. I'd like to direct my thanks to the Montesquieu Institute and also to the newspaper Trouw for being here, for inviting me. And in a way, I'm a bit angry with Professor Jesień because he didn't speak enough about Poland. So all this task is, I imagine, given to me, and I'd like to tackle it as well as I can to talk about the Polish case of European democracy, because I believe we don't have a European democracy, we have European democracies. And I would like to welcome this series. I'm impressed with what Montesquieu Institute is doing to show different European democracy cases all over Europe, and I'm very glad that also Poland is among those countries which you find interesting enough to present in this debate. So it's a great honor for me to be here with you. I have to say, frankly, I have not prepared an article, a speech. I would like to share just a couple of points with you, which I believe are helpful to understand what Polish democracy is nowadays in the context of the European Union. And I will speak to you not only, or not really as the member of the European Parliament, but I would like to speak from my original profession. I am a sociologist by profession, by education. And for me, the most interesting is always what, in fact, people think. And I would like to tell you a bit about what Polish people think about democracy. It is very clear that Poles are pro-European. Polish society has very good opinion about the European Union. And even the Euro crisis has not shaken this good opinion of the European Union. Just to give you some data, I have to do it, of course. 48% of Poles judge the works, the functioning of the European Union as very good. This is the highest in the EU as far as I know. This is data from last year. 12% of the Poles think that EU works badly. And astonishing, 38% is neutral or has no opinion. So it shows that the Poles are very positive towards the EU or are indifferent to the EU. Now, this is so far as the opinion of the EU. And I would like to give you some maybe even amusing cases of the evolution of these views among Polish people towards the EU. In the times of the referendum, in the times of the decision-making of Polish society to enter the EU or not to enter the EU in 2003, this group in the society who was the most negative towards the EU is now this group of society, this class, which is the most positive, which is foreigners. They were the most afraid of the changes that the EU can bring to the traditional society, to their way of life, and now they are those who are the most enthusiastic about the EU because they benefit directly the most. So this evolution is very, very clear. I need to tell you also a little bit about this origins of the good and positive or even Euro-enthusiastic views among Poles towards the EU. And this cannot be by no means limited to direct benefits in the terms of agricultural policy or structural policy, or all those roads and bridges which are built in Poland thanks to the EU funds. Following the research that is being done by different in different contexts and by different authors, Poles see the EU as a modernizing force. Poles see the European Union as a political force which makes the country more modern, better for the citizens as far as the reform of the public administration is concerned, as far as so-called governance is concerned. Of course, this view is by no means uncritical, but the conclusions, the total balance of this judgment of the EU in case of the Polish society is definitely positive. And what comes next is my question: what then the Polish people think about the democracy in Poland? And then we see that the views are dramatically different. If we ask, and this research has been done in a very regular way for years now in Poland, when we ask people what do they think about the democratic institutions in Poland, then the picture is very dark. And I have chosen just a couple of institutions. I don't have time here to present a total picture. But if we look at the parliamentary democracy, because I believe this is something which might be interesting for you, is a very, very worrying picture of the society which disappreciate the work of its national parliament. If we ask, what do you think about the work of Sejm, which is our lower chamber, then 71% of people say the work of the Polish Sejm is done badly. They judge it very negatively. And 17 people find the work as well done. So you see, first of all, that people have a very clear opinion. Contrary to the EU, when many people have no opinion, they don't know, or they are positive. Here, most of the people know. They know what they think about the work of the Polish parliament, and they find this work badly done. This is similar, slightly better for the upper chamber, for the Senate, but the picture is worrying as well. 53% of those who answer the question say the Senate works badly. Similarly, the Polish society is not satisfied with the work of its judiciary. When you ask people what do they think about the work of the judges and the courts, then only 25% of people think that the work is done well. Then more than half Poles think that the courts work badly. It is a very steady picture. When we look at the last 20 years, it is not improving and it is not getting worse. Only for the judiciary we can see some improvement. Also similarly, when you look at all this research which asks people about whom they trust, people in Poland don't trust the parliament. Of course, those who are the most trusted are, like in all the countries as far as I know, firemen. But this is because mainly people will never have any encounter with firemen. If we look at another indicator of the view of democracy or the democratic institutions, I picked up another one, and this is press freedom, which I find very relevant. And here Poland scores very well. In the Press Freedom Index, Poland is at a very good 22nd place. It might sound far away, 22nd place, but it's very close to the UK or France. So in Poland, definitely press freedom has been achieved. Now, of course, it has to be asked why Polish people are so satisfied about the EU and so dissatisfied about the democracy in Poland. In my personal view, this is the heritage of the past, where Polish people over the not only decades but centuries have been trained and experienced in distrusting those who govern them. And for good reasons, as we know. And all the changes that were brought in Poland after 1989 are not able to change the attitude of the Poles towards those who govern them. And I would like to draw your attention to a particular case of a protest movement in Poland linked to citizens' initiative to change the electoral law. We have proportional electoral system for the lower chamber, and recently, with the recent elections in 2011, there is a new electoral system introduced for the Senate, and paradoxically, the electoral result is exactly the same. So this also shows that at the moment, the debate we have in Poland is focusing on, this is of course my opinion, which I would like to debate with you very much, is not targeted at institutional change, but rather is a form of discontent expressed in very scattered citizens' expressions, like a protest against ACTA. It was a very dispersed, modern type of a protest expressed by people who were afraid of losing their freedom of expression in internet. This contrast, which I try to show to you, is not unique to Poland. There are other countries in the EU where the low trust in the national government is well combined with a high trust in the EU. So no matter how we think we are so special, we in Poland, we are not. We have cases like Italy, for example, but not only, where this is a very similar pattern. Now, when I was preparing myself for this debate, I tried my best to object to what Professor Jesień wrote in his article, but I failed because to a large extent I agree with what he has written, with one exception. And this is linked to the interpretation of the euro crisis and its importance for the European debate. I believe that it was not the Treaty of Maastricht which brought the European debate to the interest of the public, which brought it out of the elitist discourse, but it is rather the crisis of the euro as a currency which creates an interest around, paradoxically and somehow ironically, which creates an interest for the European debate. I will stop here, and I am looking forward to the discussion, and also if you are interested in what is happening in the European Parliament at the moment. My specialty is in fact the budget of the EU. At the moment we are in a very difficult moment of trying to conclude the preparation, if you wish, of the next multi-annual budget for the EU for 2014-2020, but also very importantly of all the legal basis that will be deciding and regulating all the EU programs for the next 7 years. And my experience as a European parliamentarian shows that the debate, national debate, is much more important than the European debate, if you wish. First of all, because we have no European demos. Finally, the members of the European Parliament are elected by the, not even national, but the regional constituencies. And also because the intergovernmental decision-making in the EU is done, finally, by nationally elected prime ministers and nationally elected ministers. So I don't see here in the nearest future a possibility to create European demos, or even for having the European Parliament as the place for European debate. When this, what is happening now, definitely with the Euro crisis, there is more voice given to the national interests. And I would like to be more optimistic in this place, because I believe there is a space and need for European demos and European debate. But with the crisis, with the Euro crisis, and with all the consequences of the economic recession in many of the EU member states, the debate goes back to the national sphere, with more focus on the European themes, with more interest on the EU, but finally, paradoxically, more national. So I'm looking forward to your comments, and again, I'm very glad that I can be here with you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sidonia. May I invite you and Leszek at the table on the stage. You throw a lot of balls into the air, and to both of you, and maybe for us, the Dutchmen, the most surprising fact is that the picture on the trust in your own parliamentary democratic institutions and the European Union is quite a little bit opposite to the picture of Holland. Oh. So we once were very high, had a lot of trust in the European institutions, but since the year, I think about 10 years, there is a clear decline in the trust. So I'm very curious and look forward to our debate. I look to the audience. Is there somebody who wants to? Yes?
A very good afternoon. My name is Khalid Ahmed Chaudhry from International Human Rights Commission. I have a question for both of you regarding human rights situation in general, and then the conditions of the minorities in Poland, because you mentioned about freedom of expression or freedom of press, but I have a lot of information about violation of minorities' rights and in general the rights of the Polish public. Thank you.
Leszek, you want to reflect on that?
Yeah, I think I can give the time to Sidonia to reflect even. But I will take the first. We do have majorities, of course, and minorities, depending on how you define them. From different angles, there are majorities and minorities, and we probably don't have the ideal world in Poland, but I tend to be probably a little bit optimistic about the state of affairs in my country, mainly because I can compare to the different times when we really didn't have the opportunity to have freedom of expression and protection of minorities. So whenever there is minorities or majorities also complaining about the situation, because it's not only that minorities complain in my country, but also we have majorities which complain quite often about various things. I tend to think that it's a good sign of life, because people tend to have something which is brought to the public level of discourse, and they debate, sometimes they argue, sometimes they protest on the streets, sometimes they fight on the streets as well, with certain limits of a natural order that we need in public life. That's all acceptable. So, provided that we don't have a permanent complaint from a particular angle that could be brought to the attention of us as, say, there is a dysfunctionality of the system, I think it will be still acceptable. I don't know how to use it.
I mean, to answer such a question, I would need to know more details. What in fact, what are you talking about? Is particular case, particular
It's
group,
not a particular case, but it's the general conditions of human rights in Poland. And there are some sort of repressive acts, I mean, within the government institutions, I mean, having still the shadows of the previous mentality and working style. And then I was talking about the Romas and the Gypsy community, I mean, within the boundaries of Poland.
I mean, for me, such a guideline is and it's a very difficult, interesting, I'm sure you know.
Please, in the microphone.
Yes, I even got such an email before coming here that I should speak to the microphone, but I don't have my email in front of me, so sorry for this.
Maybe you can have it in your hands. Maybe.
That will be...
Yes, that's better.
Can you hear me better?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
For me, such a guide and guideline is the UN report on human rights. And in fact, it lists several issues that have to be improved by Poland. And they are very diverse, and I'm sure you know the document itself. It's published for all the countries in the world. And definitely there are some ongoing issues that are a remnant of the past. One thing that I'm very interested myself is the issue of institutionalized people. It's still something which is left, a heritage which we have from the communist time, that too many people are institutionalized. This is about orphans and handicapped people. And we can see that a change is happening, but it takes very long, much longer than acceptable, because it's about, it's a very complex set of, it's not an excuse, it's even an accusation, I would say. It's a certain set of habits that the administration has, that some professions have, to keep people institutionalized without any need. And when you look, for example, at the case of institutionalized children that could be in foster families or could be adopted, you can see that there is an improvement over the years, but we are still far away from the European normal. And I'm not afraid to use normative terms here, because it's a very regrettable situation where people are not given the best opportunities that they could have, just because the old system persists. This is linked to many issues, to the administrative culture, to the strength of trade unions also, who like to keep certain professions running, although there is no need for them anymore. And there is a certain, I would say there is, it takes much longer than anybody expected to change these habits from the communist time. And this is, I'm quoting this case because this case I know well. But I know that there are similar systemic problems in the way that prisons are organized, for example. So there are improvements, but they are not as quick as possible to the structural, because of the structural stubbornness that is. It just shows how difficult it is to overcome a totalitarian regime. You cannot do it very, very quickly, because a certain culture, institutional culture, persists, and sometimes to do things differently is just very difficult for people. So for me, as I said, this point of reference is always this this periodical UN review of human rights, and then I believe it shows how much has been achieved, but also how much is still to be done as far as human rights are concerned in Poland.
Would you say that the civil society in Poland is strong, which is always a good civil society is a very main pillar under the democracy? How is that in Poland?
Well, yes. Well, if you judge by the number of the NGOs per capita, for example, it's a low level still of saturation of the civil society. If you judge by the number of them being zero at the beginning of the transformation period, it's a huge progress. So then the political life, for example, is very vibrant. The local organization has been improved dramatically, and I think this is something that cannot be really appreciated from outside, because it's an internal organization of the state that has been for the last dozens of years quite centralized, but it's getting decentralized in the natural, very natural way of getting organized around the local communities. I don't know. I think I would answer that the glass is half empty and half full. It's certainly not full.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. My name is Piotr Perczyński. I'm a deputy head of mission of the Polish embassy. I have a question for both of you. I see that you're talking about some distrust or some trust to European democracy, to the European institutions. I think this is not about democracy, not about the institutions. It's just the trust or distrust just to some kind of European project. It is not so much directed to the specific institutions. I can give you an example. I think that in the Netherlands, it is the level of the enthusiasm to this European project is rather low, if I can say so as a diplomat. And I can give you quickly an example from last week. I was taking part together with my ambassador in a discussion with 15 honors class students of the Leiden University College, The Hague, all of them Eurosceptics. Okay, none of them positive about anything concerning European Union, and they were 19 years old, 20 maybe. So that I think shows a little bit what's happening. And in Poland, the country that's much poorer than the Netherlands, that's joining this club of rich guys, the enthusiasm was always much higher, and still, thanks God, it is staying on a high level. We have to think of some other, perhaps more economic reasons and issues than just looking at the level of trust or mistrust to European institutions or European democracy. Having said that, I would like to point to one interesting change, I think, and I would like you to reflect to this change. Namely, about 15 years ago, I think, or in any case, before the Maastricht Treaty, the discussion on the deficit of European democracy started. And there was all this discussion of what to do, how to make people more involved, or at least giving them the idea that they influence something. What kind of democratic mechanisms can be used, be it direct democracy, perhaps discursive democracy, European referendum. And I must say that I see something like fading out of this discussion already for quite a while. Perhaps the economic crisis, perhaps this sort of issues overwhelmed this discussion. But I think that if we are at all to talk about the European democracy and European institutions, that we have to revitalize this sort of approach, this type of discussion. Thank you.
I mean, why the European societies become more Eurosceptic is a complex issue, but it's definitely the case. I agree with you, and this is Poland has to be underlined, is rather an exception than a rule among the 27 member states. We have to be, however, very careful in Poland, and that's definitely something very important for my work, is that there is a potential for negative growth in Poland. We have those 38% people, as I said, in Poland that don't have any view of the EU. And those, once they get an idea, they will be those that will be negative. So we will be, if you wish, we might end up in the situation similar like in the Netherlands in the future if we don't if we don't do what. And that is a challenge, because this bridging of the democracy gap is one challenge, but also somehow the EU as a political project is very difficult now to explain, because its foundations or its why it was created is so blurred and so distant to people. If we recall, and also I meet students, high school students in my constituency, when we recall that the communities and the European cooperation was created to overcome famine, to make war never ever possible again, and to protect the Western Europe from the communism, then people look at you as you were from the moon, because they don't know what's famine. Famine is somewhere in Africa. Most of the people are concerned that they are getting too fat. Famine is not something they are worried about, you see? And war is something also so abstract that only, grandparents talk about if they are still alive, and mostly it's just even their grandparents don't remember war anymore. And communism compromised itself. So all these three wishes, political wishes that created the European project, evaporated. At least this is how people see it nowadays, especially young people. So the question would be, is the solution to scare people, to tell them, look, this is what we have now, this peace and stability and welfare is not something forever, it's something that has to be achieved again. This is in a way threatening people or scary. Look, if we don't work together, war can happen again. But it is not the type of politics that I would like to do, for example. I think it's not fair to tell people scary scenarios, look, do you want to have another Yugoslavia and things like that? It's not. So it's not the way. And I think that that is the biggest challenge now, to reinvent the work. Why? To reinvent the reason for those 27 members to work together. And I believe that 28 soon, with Croatia, of course. So then I believe that the reason to keep the project alive, if we don't want to threat people or scare them or terrorize them, is to show the EU in the global context. That the EU and Europe as continent, to survive in the global dimension, we have to work together. When you look at demography, when you look at the economic situation, we are getting smaller and smaller as European continent. We are shrinking. So the only way to survive with our model of the society, of our model of economy, is to work together. And I think that this is something that has to be shown to people also practically. What does it mean practically? And I believe that in the country like the Netherlands, when you are so open, when you have such an open economy, it's something that people do understand. To be able to sell your products, to be able to keep your lifestyle, to keep your society alive, you cannot stay only within your limits, I imagine. But at the same time, this type of political discourse is very boring, is very unexciting, and many politicians don't want to do it. They prefer to go in the other direction, to say, look, the EU is bad, I could do anything for you, but Brussels makes it impossible. You know, it's raining and today it's not raining. But if it's raining, it's because of Brussels. And all these arguments, they just sell much better than the EU as the positive historical experience. So that is a very, very difficult challenge, and because it's so difficult, we will definitely see more Euroscepticism by politicians and by voters. And I'm sure that the next European Parliament will be a very Eurosceptical parliament. And now on the, and this is of course linked to the deficit of democracy. And I believe that this deficit of democracy is, on the European level, is closely linked with the deficit of democracy on national level. This is something which goes directly. Just citizens, many citizens are more and more doubtful whether they can express themselves through traditional political process. Political parties are less attractive, and voting, participating in elections is less attractive, is getting less attractive, and these are issues which, in my view, have to be addressed by politics at the moment. And definitely more direct democracy could be a solution, but also we should not have illusions that we can have a Swiss type of democracy with referenda on every issue. That will not work, definitely not in Poland. So to conclude, I would say there is no other way but very step-by-step boring way of political work where to show people that it makes difference for the Europeans to work together. And not by scaring, as I said, but showing also that we need to compete in the global context.
Thank you. Would you go as far as one of our older columnists in Holland, Mr. Heldering from the liberal paper, the NRC Handelsblad? He said that democracy itself is hazardous, is a risk for the European Union because it's always focused on the short term and not so much on the long term, which makes it difficult for politicians to show results.
When I look at the discourse on the EU in the UK, for example, then you can see that there is a threat of this short-term thinking, like promising drastic solutions, like yes, there will be a referendum to leave or to stay, and this makes people interested, not the content of staying, not the content of leaving, but just yes, I can make a difference. And that's very dangerous if I can interpret this that way. So less thinking about the long-term consequences, but just very short-term decisions. That's definitely dangerous. But at the same time, I believe that we now in the EU do have institutions which go beyond 4 or 5 year elections. And these institutions, if we look at the council, there is a certain institutional memory and continuity because there are overlaps in elections. So I believe, and also in the other institutions, for example, the high trust in the judiciary on the European level in Polish society is also very interesting, that people trust this type of, and also the Council of Europe's judiciary framework to seek justice beyond Poland, how much people appreciate it, even though they will never personally use it, most of people. The very fact that it exists makes difference for people. So I am, in this sense, optimistic in the raison d'être of the European institutions, because they give, even sometimes theoretical, but they give an escape to the citizens who are not satisfied, at least in case of Poland it's very visible, to those citizens who are not satisfied with how democracy works in their country.
Thanks. I'll go back to the audience and maybe a couple of questions together.
2 weeks ago, I think it was, I attended another meeting of the Montesquieu Institute about the state of democracy from the Dutch perspective. And I remember one of the lecturers was one of the persons who took the initiative to also organize a campaign for a national referendum against a possible European budgetary union in the future, as he suggested it. And I remember that there was an interesting discussion about the balance of powers between the institutions in Brussels, and also the balance of power between the sovereignty of national states and also the EU itself. So my question now to you is, what do you think at the moment the Polish point of view, both of politicians and also of the public at large, is towards these two fields, the balance of power between the democratic institutions and also the balance of power when it comes to who is going to be the sovereign of decision-making for the coming process of maybe indeed economic and monetary union in a much more integrated way than we have experienced it so far.
Maybe you react on this first, immediately. Yeah.
This is a very good question, because for the first time since maybe there is some other case, but it's the only case that I have seen that this issue of the balance of power between the European institutions popped out in the Polish media and in the Polish discourse is now when the Prime Minister Tusk, Prime Minister of Poland, in media started to discuss with the President of the European Parliament about the adoption of the next multi-annual budget. And to my knowledge, it's the first time that an average reader could learn about this tension. Because, I mean, we have to be also conscious that not everybody is so concerned as we hear in this room about the balance between the institutions. So it was the first case, and I'm sure it will be not the last. So now, with all the tensions and the criticism of or interest of the public in the EU, also now this balance of the I would say even power game between institutions, it becomes more visible to Polish citizens. There were signs of this also in other countries. I'm sure you know cases like that from the Netherlands, when basically the line is like this. The Prime Minister comes back home and says, yes, I will say no to Brussels. That's basically the line, to simplify things. But we have to be very careful to see it, and this is again what I mentioned as the short-term Euroscepticism. Say, I'm good for you, my voters, and I will defend you against Brussels. And that's something which I find just not the best way to do politics, but it sells. It sells because it's much easier to show yourself in the contradiction to Brussels as to work with Brussels to solve some common problems. But there is no other way to solve problems of the euro crisis than to work together. And we have seen it now, for example, on the issue of finance ministers now last night, working on the Cyprus issue. But to answer your question, there is no other, I mean, we need to talk about the Treaty of Lisbon, which we rediscover constantly. It's a pioneering work in case of the budgets of the EU. We are confronted with a new, I mean, we as the co-legislators now, or one of the budgetary powers in the EU with the Council, we discover more and more that the Treaty of Lisbon is not what we first thought, and that it is a certain trade-off. And namely that, in fact, the role of the European Council comes to the fore, which is not even provided by the Treaty of Lisbon. I'm talking, of course, about the budget at the moment, because it's the area which I look closely at. And then the treaty says that the EU multi-annual budget, for the first time, because before it was not even in the treaty, that the multi-annual budget of the EU, which is multi-annual financial framework, is decided by the European Parliament and by the Council. But what happens in reality is that none of the institution works on this, but the European Council works on this with Herman van Rompuy. So we are now confronted with a life outside of the Treaty of Lisbon. if you understand what I want to say. So we are now, as the European Parliament, trying to bring in the process to what we believe is the correct interpretation of the Treaty of Lisbon. And the issue is how to explain this to the wider public. It is a very, very difficult mission. And now, in case of Poland, it is very visible because of the tension between the Prime Minister and the President of the European Parliament. But all this finally has to be brought back to the rails of the Treaty of Lisbon, which means the European parliamentarians have to sit down together with the Irish presidency and prepare over 60 regulations to regulate the new EU programs. So I would say there is two parallel lives. There is the public discourse, where national politicians want to explain what they do, how do they defend national interests in Brussels, and then there is a work to find, finally, compromise, to have the multi-annual budget enter into force from the 1st of January 2014. So all this, what we are witnessing now, is a new confronting our work with a new reality of the Treaty of Lisbon, where the European Parliament has gained a lot of power, but not as we first thought. It's more, I would say that from the budgetary power, it's moving to the legislative more. And it's a very important year, in my view, where we have to solve these institutional questions, so we can smoothly agree the programs and agree the financial envelopes. So I don't know how far it responds to your question. I'm just trying to show to you that we are rebuilding the ship on sea, if you wish. We have to agree the new programs, and we have to at the same time interpret the Treaty of Lisbon, which has a lot of, in my view, I would say, myself personally, I'm still very surprised that we are not yet in tribunal against the Council, because some of the issues are really impossible to have clarified without the court involved. But I'm sure we will have all this somehow done until the end of the year.
Leszek, you defended in the article the method of trial and error in Europe, which has been proven to be very successful in a way, although democracy is inherent to, I think, muddling through. It belongs to democracy. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, probably it would also need to add a few words on the Polish perception of the balance of power, because I understand it was also a taint of this question. Yes, this trial and error is, well, in the public life, I think we always try to recapitulate what is simplified, what is getting simplified as well. And yeah, it's the balance of power as a practice in Brussels or in the European Union is not well understood and well thought through in the member states. I'm not sure it's well thought through and understood in Brussels either, but it's another story. Depends where. There are various points of view. In the Commission is differently seen as in the Council or in the European Parliament. So, but the matter and the fact is, I think that Poland is, if I can try to aggregate the country, is always portraying itself as a country that's supporting the community method, what it's called. Now, in the public perception, I think the community method, which is not my perception because I'm too much specialized on that, but in the public perception, the community method equalized the Commission. Sorry to say, it's not the Parliament. The Commission is the defendant of the community method. And if it's counterbalanced by another option, which is, I would say, less visible but still remaining within the country, is the council-concentrated option. And actually it's practiced by various governments that it's being played either or in a sense that the government of this kind can be claiming that it's community method defending, but it's actually referring the case to the Council, European Council, very much in the line of the Luxembourg Compromise, if you know, line of reasoning in order to defend the case. So it's behaving like any other government actually in case, but the country, it's I think in its public opinion, it's trying to understand itself as some as a country that defends the European Commission. That would be my trial and error in that particular case.
Thank you. We go to another question.
My name is Jan Minkiewicz, and I'm since a couple of years engaged in the problems of Polish migrant workers in the Netherlands. Now, when you talk about institutions, the social dimension of Europe is mostly forgotten. And I would like to go back to that, because as you perfectly know, the free movement of people was the last of the last to be organized in Europe. And it's still not fulfilled. There are still a lot of problems with the movement of people in Europe. So before we globalize, we should regulate these things as well. Now, the economical crisis and Euro crisis produces new waves of migrant workers from Southern Europe to Northern Europe. And this counts now in millions of people in Europe who are hopping from country to country. That would not be a problem if not the protection of these people. These people are at the moment not protected by Europe because there are hardly any European regulations to help these people or to secure their rights. But these people are less and less protected by their own governments, who either do not want to protect them for whatever reason or are not capable to do that. Because the business is more and more internationalized, it's more and more cross-country constructions, and there is no government, no power in Europe which can follow all these movements on the market. And I would like to draw your attention to that this is one of the elements of demos. Yeah? If you talk about demos, which is pertaining to millions of people in Europe who are further and further away from these demos.
You're talking only about the internal migration, not from outside the EU.
I'm talking about the internal migration.
Okay.
On the issue of migrant workers, there is, those who are interested probably know, but for the others it might be of relevance, there is a very, very controversial and difficult debate in the European Parliament about linked to the directive of posting of workers. And I believe it's a very topical debate which shows the major dilemma. A dilemma between over-regulating and deregulating. Just for those of you who are less interested or less who are not following this issue, it's a directive which is already some years old, which regulates how long people can work abroad, being delegated from their country, still under the regime of their social insurance back home, while de facto working abroad. To give an example, there is a Polish construction company who employs people in Poland, but the work is being done in the Netherlands. And the workers are covered by the social insurance scheme and insurances and retirement, whatever, all the system back in Poland. And the controversy is about how long those people can work abroad. And this case shows that trade unions in receiving countries want to have this time as short as possible. Because they say, okay, after a certain time, which means short time, those people who should be covered by, in this case, Dutch social system. But everybody knows nobody will employ those people then. So then it means that de facto it will make it mostly not possible for many of these companies to send the workers at all abroad, so it will mean these people lose their job. So it's not, I'll give you an example of, I have been recently to Munich, and I had very good talks there with also with trade unionists and with some social democratic politicians in the Landtag in Bayern, and that was very, very interesting because trade unions are not happy about the fact, I'm talking only about, and this is important also in this debate, about people legally employed, because another issue is people who are completely in the gray zone, which is something we should also debate, in my view. Because, and then in this case of Bayern, the trade unions are not satisfied about the fact that there are Polish seasonal workers working for a major car manufacturer who do exactly the same job as local workers, but they are paid less. So the trade union activists believe that they should be paid the same, but everybody knows that then the factory would not employ them. So it means that these people will not have this job at all, or even worse, will get out of the system totally and will work black, which for a big company is not very probable, but for many small companies, the probability with over-regulation that people will work completely without any protection is very high. So I don't say that one model is better than the other, but in this case of this debate, we need to answer these questions. How far we regulate so people still stay within the system? Because there is a certain moment when you regulate so much that people get completely out of the system and they work black, which is, in my view, the worst case. So back to the directive, the major issue is about the time. How long people can work being delegated. And then it shows to me also this practical issue, because it's a very practical issue. It's about which conditions people work in. For me, it shows also a more general issue about the EU also. That EU is so far away from being integrated because people, what's important for people, like their health, their job, their retirement, is linked to national state, not to the EU. And that's why we will not in the nearest future have a European demos, and European nation, forget it, or not even European level debate on important things for people, because healthcare, social insurances, and retirement are linked to the national state. But at the same time, you cannot ignore, and definitely you will agree with me, we cannot ignore people who live on the border of different nations. They work somewhere else, they might get accidents somewhere else, and they get retired somewhere else, or they have their family even somewhere else. So all these questions definitely need to be regulated, and in this case of this directive, we see how controversial the issue is. But the most important for me and for my political group is to stay reasonable in this regulating. So we don't push by our goodwill and wishful thinking people completely in a gray zone.
Thank you. Leszek?
If I may add just a few words on that, because and I would hope to add a little bit to that perspective, is that for me, to the best of my knowledge, I only know one party in the European Union member state which actually have got a postulate to introduce the European minimum wage, which is, to the best of my knowledge, the Austrian Social Democrats. And it's an interesting postulate, because if you think that it might be ever introduced, that there will be an equal European minimum wage, that you could probably see how difficult it is to imagine an acceptance, public acceptance for that, not to mention the political acceptance for that. So when we say that we want to have the social Europe. And it's of course ultimately difficult in the nutshell of the details that you have just discussed, as much as in a very general provision of something like protection or for example, minimum wage. So in order to bring a different perception, I would argue that one thing that at least appeals very much to me, and I think, and I always thought that it's appealing very much to the Polish mind, if ever something like that exists. In the case of European Union, is the notion of freedom. The fact that we are able to travel, to enjoy the opportunities, the things that can be found in the Netherlands, in Britain, in France, in Poland, in the Czech Republic. It's something that is fantastic. In a sense, this democracy that you have defended, and which is always so often described as dull and boring, has a stream of thinking that is actually wonderful. And this is something that is given to us in the form of the European education.
Sir, question.
Yes, Marcin Zieliński, Stichting Plan or Foundation Plan. I would like to go back to the question, the issue of democracy, because I have a feeling that we are a bit off the track. And actually refer to the first answer of Professor Jesień, so about minorities. You mentioned that actually all the fuss going on in Poland about minorities needs to be accepted, and that it's actually a sign of life. But we need to remember that when speaking about minorities, we not only speak about ethnic minorities, but also about religious and sexual minorities. So how would you actually reflect on the words of the former Polish president, by the way, from today's issue of Gazeta Wyborcza, and I'm going to quote now: "They need to know they are minority, they need to get used to the fact that they are minority, and they need to get used to the minor things. They shouldn't stand out." And the second question, also referring to Professor Jesien's speech, he also said that people in Poland are very often disappointed, and they do not support new reforms, mainly because of the fact that they are unaware of what's going on the European level. But don't you think that actually it's quite the opposite? Maybe people are actually aware of all the effects of harmonization and standardization, and they are simply aware of that there might be more drawbacks than positive effects. And isn't this actually democracy when we talk and when we discuss things and not accept what's imposed from the general government?
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm not sure I can answer either of your questions, in fact, or comments fully, but I will try, of course. As you may know, the task of interpretation of our former president, Lech Wałęsa, is considered to be impossible in Poland. And there is a famous, actually a very famous quote or reaction from his interpreter, with whom he traveled to the United States for the first time, who found it impossible to translate the Prime Minister. So the quote that you have given is, of course, a decent endeavor, which I admire, to translate this message from Polish, which is difficult to understand, into English, which make it even more difficult. But nevertheless, the issue is there, and of course, my own reaction is as very much as I have delivered it or tried to deliver it before. The discourse between minorities and majorities, in this case, President Wałęsa has put himself into a certain majority, is a sign of life for any democracy. And this is something that I consider, as a political scientist, as an element of the political landscape or social landscape in my country that is very positive. I would not opt to choose either he was right or wrong. And that's something to be done by anybody, probably for our understanding of the particular situation and democracy in general. But the fact that this discussion is taking place is an excellent and positive sign of the democratic life in my country, in my view.
The politician keeps silent? No.
No, I'm so happy because for the first time I can really disagree with Professor Jesień. Because I disagree with President Lech Wałęsa. I have a completely different view. I think he's okay. He can have his views. That's obvious, and I can disagree with him. So and I can also disagree with you. This is great. Yes, and. I think that this is a debate we are going to have more and more in Poland, and this, my interpretation is also one of the elements or areas where Poland has to have this modernizing discourse. And I am myself, together with our plenipotentiary for equal opportunities, we are struggling to have Poland ratify the convention, the Council of Europe's convention linked to domestic violence. And I have to say that I didn't even knew that people exist in Poland who think that there is no domestic violence. Imagine there are people who think there is no domestic violence, except for in some feminist heads it exists. So it's good to have some difficult debates, because then you can learn that people have different views, and they have very weird views sometimes. So we should not be afraid to have this debate. And finally, linked to again this discourse on the domestic violence in Poland, it's far from finished, because then you have to finally leave the ideological level and go back on a more important level, on a pragmatic level. How the state should assist those that are in a weaker situation. Finally, this is the question. Even detaching yourself from the ideological dimension, you still need to have solutions to those who have to be defended by the state against something. So I'm sure that we will have more and more these debates in Poland. This was already visible in same link to the civil partnerships debate. Some people want to address this debate and present their views, which I think is positive. What I'm more worried about is that some people believe that we should not talk about this. It's just something which should be a taboo, and that's not correct. So even if we have different views, when we talk, it's still there is still hope.
From this perspective, President Wałęsa's remark was particularly useful.
Yes, it would.
I'll give the microphone away.
No, give it back to you.
Okay.
To the people, give it back to the people.
Well, thank you very much. I was wondering, you talked about people opting out of society, more and more people not participating in democracy, especially with the high percentage of people distrusting government in Poland. I was wondering, you were the vice president of the European Youth Forum a way back. I was wondering if you could talk about youngsters in this respect. If you talk about how they view participating in democracy, and how, if their views on perhaps participating in politics, or perhaps this debate which is going on the European level is voting at 16, which is giving the right to vote to 16-year-olds instead of 18-year-olds. Perhaps you could comment on that.
I'm very grateful to you that reminded me I used to be young. That's very nice. I used to be, yes, when people ask me what have I done with my youth, I have spent it in youth organizations. That is true. That is true. It's true. I mean, I cannot get over it, because there are always people like you who ask me things linked to the youth and its participation or non-participation. I believe, in case of Poland, we have seen a lot of mobilization of young voters in 2007 and 2011 elections. So there is a potential for young people participating when they can see they can make a difference. definitely, there is. And there are positive sides of it, because when people go and participate in elections, that I find it very positive, but there is also, and this is visible not only in Poland, the potential for radical voting behavior, for radical left to radical right. And young people are more tempted or more attracted to this kind of radical views for different reasons. And also another thing which was very interesting in Poland is mobilization of young people in the ACTA case. When there was, just for those who did not follow it, when there was the debate on the privacy in internet and the access to internet, then finally those who were never ever participating in official democracy said, look, now we are interested in the political process, but not using official channels, but going in the streets. And spamming politicians, by the way. Yes. So, but I have to say that I got more spam concerning the animal slaughter transportation than ACTA. Myself. But I should not generalize, but that was my experience. So, and these were also very young people who are interested in non-mainstream issues like welfare of slaughter animals, for example. So I see the potential. I think that that's not true that young people are not interested in politics. I disagree. But at the same time, the political debate has little to offer to young people. It's just not attractive. And I can see also when I look at youth organizations, they are not like they were when I was there. There are less and less people, there is less and less people, they are less interested, less independent in the way they work in political youth organizations. But this is because they express themselves somewhere else. Now, on concrete solutions, I had a look at the 16 years as a voting age. But apparently the interest, there were some research showing that the interest of people aged from 16 to 18 in voting is very low. So it would not increase turnout, but it would decrease turnout. So that's just the problem. Now, I believe that online democracy could help, because it's a way for young people that they are active already, participating in different forms of civil participation. So if voting could be added on this, I think it would be good. I mean, for example, even voting by letter could help already, because many people who are happy with their life during a day of vote, of elections, they just go sailing or go for a walk, or they are away from where they are registered. And that's a big problem for voters of my party. They are so satisfied that they have holidays on elections normally. I'm of course exaggerating a bit, but there is a problem that many people think their life is okay. What can I, or what should I change with my voting act? So they prefer to do something else on that day. If they had some tools which are easy to use, like online voting or voting by letter, it could, I hope, I imagine, or I'm almost sure, increase the voting turnout. Now, on the Polish society and young people in general, I believe, I was shocked by something I read just completely by chance in a Polish newspaper about poverty. Because we tend to think that poverty is linked to the situation of being old, lonely, handicapped. But it's not the case in Poland. In Poland, if you look at retired people, retired over 65, only every fifth is in risk of poverty. But when you look at children, 35%, not 20, but 35% of children live in poverty. So the younger you are, the more excluded from the society you are. And that is a very big problem in Poland. I have no clue how it is in the Dutch society. I will read afterwards because it is very interesting. But Polish society is very much oriented at older generation. It is. And if it is positive or negative, I think it's very problematic. Because it is, of course, linked to the electoral process, that these are the people who vote. These are the people who participate in the process. While the others, remain, the younger you are, the more silent you are. And that is definitely something which I always explain to young people when I meet them. It's not about being obedient and participating in state procedure. It's about fighting for your future. When you participate politically, you can assure better prospects for yourself. And that's something which I believe is somehow not realized. Now, youth unemployment. This is also a form of exclusion. And when I had a very unpleasant debate with my party colleague 3 days ago on the radio, we did not prepare. It was this kind of radio program when you talk nicely with your party colleague, but we did not prepare well. And thanks God it was for a local radio. I hope nobody. But it was exactly about the youth guarantee. It's an endeavor or a plan by the European Union to help youngsters leaving school or recently losing a job to have a work experience or to be able to continue education or vocational education. And I think it's a very good thing. And my interlocutor thought it was wrong, that youth guarantee is just a fake, then just people will have 3 or 4 extra months of experience, but it gives nothing, no. And I realized that nobody contests all the measures that the state is providing for those people who, because being between education and work is a very delicate moment of human life. And being between the end of your work and your retirement is also a very delicate moment and difficult moment for people. But how much help people have from the state in the pre-retirement time and how little help people get when they are in the pre-employment is shocking to me. It is shocking. So this is something that is lacking and missing from the debate in Poland. I think it's partly young people's fault also that they don't participate, because I mean it's very naive to hope that somebody will represent your interest if you are so silent. So in this sense, I see. It is my optimism for this regular and boring political process. When people see it concerns them, it helps. And I have been also positively very inspired by a meeting with local politicians in my region. There was a meeting and there were a lot of women who never ever did politics in the past, but they entered local politics because they wanted to change something, and they realized that people who are in power in their local government, very local government, will never take their interest into consideration. Just one example of a woman who entered politics at the age of 50, and she said, I was fed up with my local council. They decided, like 17 men, they decided to have a playground for kids and build this playground for kids 2 kilometers away from the village. And she said, this is enough. This is enough. I have to be active in politics, because if I was there, that would be made for people, not just to spend the taxpayers' money for something, but to make it really for those who need it. So that's my encouragement for when I go have meetings in schools. I very much encourage people to fight for their own interest. There is nothing embarrassing about it.
So we have to come to an end to this. I look at the clock. It's almost quarter. But one last question.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm a little bit surprised by your statement that it's the fault of the children themselves that they're not participating. Okay, that's how I interpret it. But I have some Polish friends, university students in Krakow. I've been there twice. They are very Italian people, but they are really skeptic towards, as you told us, the national parliament and democracy and stuff. Why? Because they are linking things that are happening in their lives to the politics in their country. For example, I have a friend, she has a scholarship. She's studying at the university in Krakow. She still has to work 30 hours a week at a bar for 7 zloty per hour, so €1.5 per hour, to pay for her life. She's linking the fact that she has to work so much to the parliament, that it's the fault of the parliament that I have to work so much. Why aren't they making a law that I need, that there is a minimum loan, as he said. And they're making this fact that that they're making so less money, they have to work so much. They are giving the democracy, the politics of Poland. They are giving. It's their fault that it's like that, and they're making it like a big joke. Like, I don't have any trust in Poland whatsoever. Reason I'm going to another country, and I think that's why the European Union is so great in their minds, because they can they can run away from the country.
Can I say a word?
Yes.
Yeah, I teach students. I have taught in Krakow, but I haven't. But I don't now, so it's probably not your friends. But the fact is that I would love to disagree with my colleague here at the table, and this is exactly what yeah, I will hard. And one of the bad things to do is to quote from yourself, I mean myself, and that's the sign of old age that we do. But in fact, what I would like to say is that we could use, in fact, electronic means in order to empower the youngsters, the young people, and to spread, in a sense, our democracy, and to perhaps move into a new and quite interesting phase of direct democracy in the European Union through the means of electronic media, and that's something that I wrote back in 1960, in the 96. So that's why I said it's a quote from myself. But there is a way out. The thing is that in fact we have quite a rigid and frozen democracies in our national societies, and that's probably something that we can't change very easily. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sidonia, you want to?
Okay, I
for
have
a
to
short
make things
answer?
clear. I have to make things clear. I don't think that children are responsible for the fact that they are in poverty. I mean, excuse me, this is going too far. What I want to say, and I can defend it, and it might be very much in line with what you said, that Polish society as it is organized now is organized to fulfill the political and practical demands of older generation. When you look at our retirement system, about the social transfers, about the income level of different age groups, I mean, that's the way it is. Poland is investing in its old generation. It's not investing in its young generation. And I think it's the biggest civilizational mistake of my country. And I can, of course, now enter into blaming game, who is responsible for this. And it will not be a very complicated blaming game. It's just those decide who are in their interest it is. And that's the way, and it would work if we had a different demographic situation. But demography is negatively strengthening this already difficult political process. But what I want to say, and I am aware of this exit strategy that many Polish people, young Polish people, choose, saying, okay, I don't play your game, I emigrate. I'm aware of it, I'm not blind. That's a very also, and it again strengthens the same negative process, because the most talented, the most courageous, they say, bye-bye to your establishment. I am looking for my happiness somewhere else. So it again deepens the problem. What I want to say is that at that moment, I believe that there is a certain responsibility on those who participate in the political process also to fight for their rights. And there is nothing embarrassing about fighting for your rights as the others do. On the contrary, I think that this exit option is the problem. So I would like to finish with something optimistic. I will do my best. I would say That will not be easy. On this, when we talk about this generational, I was in a very good debate some time ago, and then one professor, listening to all the politicians, he said, "You can talk and talk, but demography will kill us all here." And there is, I believe, a clever society should invest in its youth, starting from children. And this is definitely what I do in my work, but I feel sometimes lonely in my endeavors. But I don't think there is another way to do it.
So we do, because I teach.
Thank you both very, very much. We in Holland we have a saying when a political meeting is ending in complete confusion, and the saying is. It looks like a political rally, a Polish Landestag. Well, after this meeting, I think we should reconsider this saying, because you gave us a lot of clarity. Thank you very much. The Institute have a little present for you. He's making he's from France, Montesquieu. No, it's from I think from France. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the audience as well for your patience. I hope you enjoyed the debate. We will have another debate on the state of European democracy on April the 8th. And by that occasion, we will talk with the Germans. Thank you very much and hope to see you again.